Everyone, and welcome to this exchange. The title of this exchange webinar is Jisc 2, Improving Energy Efficiency in Your Data Center. And it will last approximately 30 to 45 minutes of content with then time for questions at the end. Thank you for registering, and thanks also to today's speakers. We have Rob Bristow from Jisc, Peter Essen and Brian Henderson from the University of Aberdeen, Steve Bowes-Phipps from the University of Hertfordshire, and Damien Dalton from the University College Dublin. My name's Emma, and I'm the Member Events and Communities Officer here at the EAUC. As you know, the EAUC delivered a Sustainability Exchange, which was initially a funded project from HEFCE and led by Staffordshire University. So what are exchanges? Exchanges are free, short lunchtime webinars on a range of sustainability topics. Anyone can present them if you'd just like to get in touch with us at sustainabilityexchange@eauc.org.uk or myself. Just a little bit of housekeeping to go over now. I'm hoping that everyone can hear okay. I have muted you all just to avoid background noise so that you can hear as clearly as possible. If you have any issues hearing at any point during this exchange, please could you let me know using the chat box and just pop me a message directly down the bottom there. Hopefully most of you have working microphones. Don't worry if you don't, as you will still have a chance to ask any questions at the end by typing them to me in the chat box and I'll read them aloud. The webinar is being recorded so that you can view it again or share it with colleagues or friends. It will be made available on the Sustainability Exchange with the presentation and any other resources a few hours after this exchange webinar has ended. You will also be sent a short survey to gain feedback. Please take the time to complete this as it does benefit both yourselves and us here at the EAUC. Okay, so that's all from me now. Thanks, and I'm going to pass you over to Rob.
Good morning. I trust everyone can hear me. My name is Rob Bristow. I'm a program manager at Jisc. I'll just say a little bit first about Jisc and a little bit about the work we've been doing with the Greening ICT program at Jisc, and then we'll be introducing the speakers. This is the second in a series of Green IT webinars that Jisc is putting on in association with the Sustainability Exchange. There is a guide which is very, very nearly ready to be published. I'm afraid it's been slightly delayed, but we'll be sending out the link to that following the webinar and putting that on the stuff that will be the legacy of this webinar, which summarizes a lot of the stuff that you'll be hearing today and some of the other work we've been doing. So Jisc, for those of you who don't know, I think these are the sort of crucial points that the UK's expert in digital technologies, education and research. We're now a registered charity. This has been a change in the last year or so. We used to be a joint committee of the funding councils, but now a charity owned by EAUC and EAUC and Guild HE. But we're still doing the same sort of thing as we've always done. So running services, providing the network, running programs of research and development and innovation. And I think the crucial thing is leadership and bringing people together. And here we are today. So this is one small drop in the large ocean that is Jisc's engagement with the sector. Been working on the Green IT agenda for a few years back now. Some of you may have come across various bits of it. The Soft IT initiative was an early part of that. The very useful carbon footprinting tool, and there's also a wealth of case studies on the goodcampus.org site. I'll put the link into the chat box later. A wealth of case studies, reports, briefings and stuff. Some of it's perhaps a little getting a little elderly now, but I think some of the core principles still remain. Our aim was really to help the sector reduce the environmental impacts of their ICT, but also to help drive improved environmental performance across the piece. Through the use of technology, so smart buildings, using technology to make things work more efficiently. The other 98%, I think, is sometimes said, that's not of global emissions that are not caused by IT. The program's really coming to an end in a formal sense, but we'll be taking this sort of forward as part of the wider efficiency agenda that we're working with. So data centers and universities, I'm not going to speak very long because I don't want to steal the thunder of any of our speakers today, but just sufficient to say, I really like this quote from the Green Light Project from University of California, San Diego. This was some years ago now. But I think this network of ad hoc and suboptimal energy environments in departmental facilities would summarize a lot of the state of play in some places still, although as you'll hear today, people have been are showing the way to something much better. The figure I saw recently is that data centers in the UK, we're actually, it's one of our really big industries. It's quite well hidden, but we have an immense sort of number of data centers situated in the UK. And 2% of the grid output, I mean, that's a lot of electricity going into data centers. And these are some figures from our work around trying to carbon footprint the sector for these were 2011 figures, I think, 2012 figures. Those are estimates of the total ICT energy usage, and you can see that that's a fair whack of electricity. So anything we can do to make a difference is going to be useful. And the figure 8% of energy used by UK universities going to their data centers. That's, you know, again, that's a big chunk. And also, I think it's worth thinking about this agenda because it is a place where the right investment can really make a large difference. And I think you'll be hearing from our speakers today where examples of where that's happened, but also some of the issues around doing that. I would like also to draw your attention to there was a leader article in the New Scientist back beginning of 7th of November, and they basically are saying that there is now starting to be a decoupling of global emissions from economic growth, and that actually the things we're all doing to reduce energy consumption are making a difference, even though it sometimes seems like you're trying to push a very large boulder up a very steep hill. It is worth working at this because we are starting, maybe not to reduce them, but to prevent them growing quite as quickly as they would have done. I thought that was actually a very hopeful thing. I'll just put that in the chat box to everybody would help. So I'm going to hand over now to the first of our speakers. And we're going to go to Steve Bowes-Phipps. I'm sorry, the order here is slightly changed. We're going to hear from Steve Bowes-Phipps, from Data Centers Manager at the University of Hertfordshire, who's worked with Jisc for some years on data center and green IT issues. Then we're going to go to Brian Henderson and Peter Essen from the University of Aberdeen. And then we're going to hear from Damien Dalton, who is someone Jisc has collaborated with on the EU-wide initiative and has got some interesting things to say around data center metrics and things. So without further ado, I will hand over to Steve Bowes-Phipps.
Thank you very much, Rob, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be able to talk on this webinar today. And I'm going to let you know about a project that we worked, or it was co-funded with Jisc some years ago, but a lot of the work that we did proved to be an exemplar for the sector. And I particularly want to show how we used the EU Code of Conduct for data centers in order to drive those efficiencies and also then become a participant in the scheme. The reduction and reuse of energy in institutional data centers, thankfully shortened to RARE IDC, was a project that we ran in 2008. It started off in 2008, but completed in 2010. as you can see, we were the first university in Europe to achieve compliance against the EU Code of Conduct for data centres, and I'm going to tell you how we did that as we go along. Because of the use of best practice and the green innovation that took place within the project, we actually had a massive saving in capacity and reduction in the carbon footprint of the data centre. And so that really did provide us with a great base to move our data centre services on from that period onwards. And that, of course, translated into significant cost savings. You have to bear in mind that our data centres are actually quite small, just 75 square metres. And so to achieve those kinds of operational cost savings, £186,000 per year, is a very significant sum indeed. And we don't pay the bills. We didn't have to do this, but we did this because of the benefits, environmental benefits, and also the ability to put that money back into teaching and learning, which of course is what we're all about. One of the initiatives and innovations we did was to take the waste heat and use that to lower the cost of providing hot water to the library services building that we had. Our data centre was inside, and we've taken, since the project, we've taken the knowledge and the expertise that we've gained and worked with Jisc and other universities to actually bring out that knowledge and disseminate the results and the outputs to a much wider audience. Yeah, so we've been recognised by quite a number of industry experts, and also quite very proud to have picked up the Green Gown Awards in 2011 for Green IT. Okay, so the approach really was to, rather than get experts in, we really wanted to build the best practice from within our own university. So we went off and took some courses regarding best practices and what kind of technologies are required, and also went and talked to other universities and what they were doing, and really hooked into kind of what the thought leadership was around green data centres. And so we decided then to go for a design and build contract, where the onus on providing innovation comes from the supplier. That means you can have quite a number of different responses that are very difficult to match one against the other. So we used a pre-qualification questionnaire to help reduce that number. And then when the actual invitation to tender went out, it went out to a much smaller group of suppliers. But within that invitation to tender, we built in requirements of the best practices, such as the EU Code of Conduct for data centres, such as the British International Standards. And that was really useful because it gave us, if you like, it gave us a benchmark on which to evaluate those responses on. If the supplier came back and started talking about the EU Code of Conduct and they started to tell us where they were using the best practices within the design, then we had a level of confidence that they were providing the right level of innovation that we were looking for. But we didn't just build a green data center. We went off in tandem. We went off and virtualized and consolidated our estate. And so that's getting rid of old servers and making sure that we, rather than have an average utilization of about 2 to 4% of our servers, we've managed to push that up to about anywhere between 12 to 25%. That doesn't sound much, but that translates in quite a large reduction of footprint within the data center. We now have this process where every new application is evaluated to see whether it can be virtualized, and that is the norm. And that's saved a significant amount of money as well, you see. So that's you know, over 3 years saving of £340,000 in capital costs and £36,000 a year in operating expenses year on year. I also like to talk about the 4 M's of data center management, which are meter, monitor, maintain, and manage. This is all about understanding you know, how your data center runs, what kind of profile it has on a day-to-day basis, and so that you can spot when it's not being as efficient as possible. Because it's all very well building a green data center, but you've got to run it as a green data center as well. The job doesn't start at the time that that data center gets handed over. So metering is really important to see how you're performing, monitoring it to look for exceptions, maintaining the equipment to the levels of serviceability that they need to be maintained, and then managing any issues as quickly as possible so they don't get out of kilter quickly and ultimately lose your money or possibly bring down services that are critical to your institution. And you know, a fundamental part of that is the change management aspect of it. The EU Code of Conduct talks about involving the business in a change board. It talks about you know, understanding what needs to be done and when it needs to be done from a business perspective within your data center, and it's a really crucial part. And any data center manager you'll talk to will tell you that if you don't handle change management correctly, you can get out of control in your data center very quickly. So here are the results in terms of where we were and where we got to. So we started off, and I'm being quite prudent in terms of measuring our power usage effectiveness at 2.2. For those of you, hopefully everyone's come across PUE by now, but if you haven't, it's the ratio of the amount of energy that comes into your facility to the amount of energy that is used for the IT equipment itself. So a ratio. So if the PUE was 2, then for every kilowatt that went to your IT equipment, a kilowatt would be used on the facility as well. So we were about 2.2, and that was after we'd moved all of our racks and equipment out into a temporary data center. So it probably understates where we really were at, because it was pretty appalling before. But as you can see, the IT load itself only took 45% of the total power that went into the facility, because a massive 42% was going to just to try and cool the room, just trying to cool the servers down. And we had significant electrical losses of 13%. A lot of the equipment was quite old. And so this is the result after the project. You know, we got the PUE down to, well, actually it's even better than that in recent readings, but that's because we put a lot more IT load into the data center. But after a year of running it operationally, we managed to get an annualized figure across the year of 1.26. Our target's 1.22, but like I say, I feel we're actually beating that now. IT load, basically, of the total facility load went up from 45% to 80% of that electrical power usage, and the cooling was decreased considerably down to 19%. So that's where most of the savings came from. The electrical usage was down to just a negligible figure because we were using very high efficiency UPSs. So that's really it. So I may have gone a little bit quickly, but but it does leave a lot more time perhaps for questions at the end. We did blog our story all the way along. We continue to add to our blogs now. So the top one there is the Rare IDC blog. We also had a Jisc funded project in the newer Greening IT stream that where we're doing a lot more of the monitoring and metering of cost of delivering IT services. You can see how we're getting on with that as well, and that's in our CARBS blog. Yeah, I'd like to thank you very much for listening to me, and looking forward to any questions that you might want to fire my way after everyone's spoken, I guess.
Hi, good afternoon. This is the University of Aberdeen with myself, Peter Esson, and Brian Henderson.
Okay, I hope everybody can hear us okay. Good afternoon, as Peter says. We'd like to give you a relatively short whistle-stop tour of the work we've been doing over the last 12 months in our shared data centre with our partners, Robert Gordon University and the College of North East of Scotland. Recently culminated in us getting a Green Gown Award at the 2013 ceremony, and also an award from BCS UK IT Industry, which is quite a pleasing recognition of some of the excellent work that Peter and his team have been doing. I think many of you maybe recognise the sort of picture that's on the screen there. I'd actually forgotten quite how ugly the data centre used to be. In terms of being unloved, specifically I think it's certainly been unloved in terms of investment. There's not only some of the technology you see in that picture, but much of the cooling plant and maintenance plant in the background had not seen significant capital investment for a significant number of years. And also planning and maintenance, in many ways the past data centres have been seen as perhaps an evil necessity, might be the way of putting it, rather than the rock-solid area that you would want it to be. The reasons for that, twofold, I think, as the next two bullet points indicate. A combination of ad hoc growth and a lack of standardisation. I think the poor documentation, a fairly unstandardised approach to cabling, just many of the things that Steve alluded to in his presentation as being strengths, we had adopted practices that were the opposite, and hence led to the weaknesses that had been perceived in our data centre. We knew there were single points of failure. It turned out through the work that we perhaps didn't know the half of how many single points of failure we actually had. But at the end point, it became recognised that the data centre in that format was unsustainable. And I think it's important that it was recognised it was unsustainable in a number of ways. Certainly unsustainable from an ecological perspective. Peter will give you some detailed figures in the slides to follow about that side. Unsustainable from a financial perspective as well, and again Peter will provide some detail, but crucially I think from a business perspective, both as a technical environment and with regard to the visibility of the costs, it was clearly understood that we could not go on having a data centre of that nature. So basically we at the University of Aberdeen as a single entity took the decision that we had to put in relatively significant investment. Now, added to that were some other factors, some other challenges, which gave Peter a far harder job than just changing the data centre as a single entity. We have existing discussions and agreements between Robert Gordon University, ourselves, and what is now latterly the College of the North East of Scotland. Those discussions are around the odd business continuity arrangement. They were a fairly weak bond at the technological level. Just to follow through in that analogy, it was one of those instances where the planets weren't in complete synergy, but they came close enough together such that all the institutions understood that we had to look to this opportunity. If it wasn't now with regard to shared services and looking at the McClellan Review, then it would probably be never. And when we actually sat down and looked at the costed options, and Peter will help highlight those and the end results of them, it really was seen to be an opportunity not to be missed. The other significant challenge is this was our live data centre at the University of Aberdeen and had to remain so for the whole 12 months of the project, 10 to 12 months of the project. It was obviously on that period, as you'll all understand, that's across term time. And all the business critical admissions, registration, etc., had to be supported and handled through this environment. It was, as a project, a truly massive upheaval with huge complexity. We were talking about replacing all new UPS, generator, complete new floor, complete new ceiling, every single piece of server and network kit, including JANET connectivity, had to be moved at some stage. We inserted new fire suppression, new PDUs, really a huge piece of work, and also it had to involve JANET in terms of getting agreement to use the JANET infrastructure in I think a fairly new and innovative way. All that had to be accomplished, but I think it's crucial to remember that this wasn't just a single university. It was one of the springboards to this project being so successful was the leap of faith that Robert Gordon and the College of North East of Scotland took with us to make it a shared service project. I think I'm really setting Peter up here with a very significant challenge, which he'll now tell you how he succeeded in delivering.
Yes, after being given that as a wonderful opportunity to demonstrate my resourcefulness, very much similar to what Steve was talking about, we went out in a slightly different way. We went out with a functional spec that we wanted to be met. We realized that we were not the experts in building data centers. There are people building them every day of the week. But we were very clear what we wanted: low cost, low PUE, and no disruption to the business. We engaged with both Robert Gordon's and what are now NESCOL, North East Scotland Colleges, involved them in the process right the way through from the ITT. They were invited to come along and help us score it. They were invited along to look at the project board, how we governed it. We agreed between us what the rack costs were going to be. This was going to be a zero-cost option across all for us as a university. We would not make any money out of it, but we wanted to ensure that every partner picked up the appropriate costs. Very much done an open book. We eventually chose a company called Workspace Technology to come and do the work for us. We relied heavily upon the program that they put in place, and we had substantial input to that. We needed to, and we did control a lot of the sequencing and the scheduling of the work that the contractors were going to do to ensure that we had no unplanned business interruptions. That involved telling them that we want to have a period in late November, December last year that we had to move equipment because that was when we could do it from a university perspective, telling them you are not going to work over exam period where if there's any noisy work going on. So we had a lot of involvement with Workspace and a lot of detailed planning. The detailed planning allowed us to go to the business 3 months before we were actually going to do the moves, and we were able to tell them, we were able to give them a window of 1 month to say, during that 1 month, your service, which sits on this server, is going to move. We want you to tell us which day within that month is going to be acceptable to you and which time, which was a bit of a turn up for the books for them, because normally they were expecting IT to come along and saying, great, 5 minutes time, the server's coming down. So they're able to work, we were able to work with the business in a very, very effective way. The net outcome for that was, although some moves took a little bit longer than what we anticipated, we only had 20 minutes of unplanned downtime which impacted 40 users during the migration of the work. So, what do we have today? That is the same data center, believe it or not, completely transformed from top to bottom. It was a project started in July, phase 1 finished in November last year, phase 2 started in January and was finished by the end of May this year. A £1.2 million project, 58 racks of equipment are now installed, coming from Robert Gordon's, North East College and ourselves, and we have 7 spare racks. For us, one of the biggest success factors in this was the use of the cooling mechanism that we put in. We went and we put in direct evaporative cooling. We take air in from the outside, we filter it, we put it through evaporation pads when the temperature exceeds 20 degrees, which is not very often in Aberdeen. We put it through another set of filters and then into a fan wall to give us a combined hot and cold aisle arrangement. So extreme caution and diligence is played when we install equipment within racks to make sure there are no gaps within the racks themselves to allow cold air to seep through. What that does for us is that has allowed us to drop our PUE from about 2.6 in our data center down to a PUE that today is running at 1.07. Tremendous decrease for us. The results for us, we are saving, across the northeast of Scotland, we're saving almost £200,000 in power costs alone. We are also saving just under 900 tonnes of carbon across the institutes up here. Significant saving for all parties. We run our own CHP station, which means we're able to drop the cost of power even lower than what Robert Gordon's and Nescol would normally work with. Our PUE figure there is saying 1.1. That is our summer PUE value. We have seen it last week when it went down to -2. We did see it drop down to 1.05. But I'm not expecting that to happen too often. One of the questions that's being asked is, how can you prove it? We have a monitoring system in place, and that is our PUE that we share with all of our partners on a monthly basis. It allows them to see how we are gradually taking down, becoming more efficient and more effective with our PUE values. The bottom half of the graph talks to the power before and after that we have been using. Getting rid of the inefficient cooling system has certainly had a major impact, but we have also done, as Steve was talking earlier, about getting rid of the old rubbish that was in existence and dropping our critical demand from 100 kilowatts down to just under 70 kilowatts, where we are today. And the final part is, again, very much mirrored by what Steve was talking about. We now know what we have. We have monitoring for capacity, we have monitoring for alarms. Before we started this, we didn't have a very good handle on exactly what we were running with. We monitor very closely now our PUE value. We have water, which we monitor, because we do use a little bit of water during the occasional hot day that we have up here, as well as monitoring the temperature very closely within a number of parts within the data center. One of the major things that has spun out from this is that we have now a very good operational agreement with all of the partners. They know when they can come in, they know what to expect of us and what we are to expect of them. and we are sharing best practices. One of the issues that occurred last week was that one of my engineers in the data center accidentally removed a backup fiber for Robert Gordon University. It didn't impact the business at all in any way, but we sat down with them yesterday to say, this is what's happened, here are the steps that we're going to undertake to make sure it doesn't happen again. Have you guys got anything to bring to the table with your experience? And as a result, we're going to change one of our operating practices that we had in place based on taking their information. So not only are we looking at sharing the data center and sharing the environment, we're also now moving very closely into sharing an awful lot more, and we're seeing this as a real springboard for the university and for further education and higher education up in this part of Scotland to work closer together. And with that, I shall hand you on to the next person.
Damien?
Yeah, I think, yeah, Amy's moved.
Get that. So I was trying to get my presentation to the start here. It's not moving at the moment. I'm on webinar, and it's not responding to up and down buttons.
Emma, can you help Damien out with that? Just move it back.
I'm in Qatar at the moment, so I'm not blaming Qatar on this. It's my fault, but we just have a bit of difficulty here. I just want to get the start of the presentation. Okay, there we are. That's fine. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for your kind invitation for this afternoon's discussion. Just a bit of details about myself and how I came to be involved in this activity. I've done some work already with Rob Briscoe on a joint European project, as you mentioned. That project had a number of angles to it, and one of the angles was writing a policy document for the e-infrastructures community on green, sustainable data center management. And Rob and myself wrote that and delivered it to Brussels about a year ago. And it has a lot of interesting information, some of which will be presented here, about just data center usage and wastage and inefficiencies. And in addition to being a lecturer in the School of Science in University College Dublin, I also have a startup company, Strategear, and that company has developed some technology for monitoring servers and even the energy consumption inside the server down to application virtual machine level. And it does this without any physical intervention. It's all done through software and agents on one of the servers, on each server, which communicates with the master. And as part of an Irish project now, we're using the system to analyze just what's happening in the Irish University in the data center environment. That project's only started about a month or two, and we've installed a few strategy, what we call Papillon systems, the basic monitoring system, into the university. So we haven't got conclusive results yet, but in line with the general perception of how data centers are used, we're unfortunately in the position where we're not as advanced as universities outlined here in this presentation. We still have a lot of work to do, and I'll allude to that in some of the presentations. And I think we're probably representative of a lot of universities who are only beginning to become aware of the issues and trying to do something about it. So I'll go through some of the points that we've already encountered so far in that project. Sorry, just trying to get to the second slide here. Working. Sorry, Emma, can you take it to the second slide there? Responding at this. Okay, that's fine, thanks. There's plenty of reasons to be energy efficient. I mean, these have already been mentioned and everyone's quite aware of them, saving on energy costs. You want to sweat the assets, try and get as much out of the servers and the capital investment that you put into the servers without necessarily having to buy additional ones for extra loads. And there's also, with various tools, you hope to consolidate resources so that you use less racks, less space. That means less power equipment. So they're all good reasons, and people, are pretty much aware of these issues. Having also higher utilization of the servers also means that the PDUs are going to be more efficient, so the power losses in your power components are going to be less. And then there's the other aspect that green is good. It's good for the costs of running your data center, less cost, less energy. And also it's good for the environment. So on both fronts, unlike a lot of environmental initiatives which cost organizations, in fact, being green in the data center actually saves you money and saves the environment. There are also negative inducements. You have carbon credits. You have, if you exceed those, you pay penalties. We haven't had that yet in Ireland, but it's on its way. I know you have introduced this into Britain, and also your just operational costs are higher through inefficiencies. And also, just recently in the UK, I noticed that there's been even more stringent initiatives to reduce the electricity consumption by 27% in 2020 and 40% by 2030, plus other additional programs such as the EU Code of Conduct. It all means that people are aware and have to be seen to be do something about their power usage. You go to the next one there, Emma. This seems to be working at this end. If you go to the next slide, thanks. In terms of what can be achieved, this is something that Therese, Rob, myself highlighted in the report, that some very simple initiatives without necessarily spending a fortune on technology, but by just doing simple things well, such as monitoring what you're doing, metering what you're doing, you can make quite substantial gains. And the gains range from about 5% with just nominal amount of effort to more substantial gains, which is 40%. And I think these have already been expressed in the previous presentations. So there is a lot to be gained by introducing a effective and stringent energy management policy into the university. And this is a stage, in Ireland at least anyway, which we're only beginning to emerge. There is an awareness that a lot of money is being spent, but there's a certain confusion as to what has to be done. So we're really at a very early stage of the evolution of energy management in universities. We're not as advanced as you are in Britain or the UK. Can you have the next slide there, Emma? Thank you. So the data center community in Ireland is aware, but still, needs to be convinced, and that is an attitude which I think is prevalent across a wider sector, not just in Ireland, a wider sector in the data center community, both industrial and academic. So why is that? We'll see in the next slide what are the issues. Can you go to the next one there, please? Oh, thanks. This is a recent report. It's from the 451 group, and who also are associated with the Uptime Institute. And this is a report that came, or they produced in May 2013. And it illustrates that really there is still not the efforts being put into energy strategy and energy management, despite what the lip service that a lot of data centers portray. The energy strategy, you can see there, no energy strategy in place, has slightly improved from 2012. Still, well over a third of data centers have no energy strategy. Some are just starting or partial. And when you add those sort of attempts between no strategy and just a lukewarm approach to it, we're talking about 60% of the data center community are still in a position where they have good intentions, but the actions yet have to be realized. And the reasons for this is the perception that energy, although it's important, is not the highest priority, And I'll come to this of how, in the practical way, how this manifests itself from our experience talking to the various universities in Ireland. But the results here really concur with the experience that we have found, that energy, although people are aware of it, is not exactly top of their list. There are other more pressing things, maybe more mundane things that people are concerned with. And also the perception that tools are too expensive. There is a lot of tools around, and there's so many of these tools around, and a lot of them are not cheap. And so there still has to be the business case made for really the introduction of a lot of the tools to assist in the energy management in universities. And we're at the stage of trying to articulate that this is a cost-effective way to operate, that there is obviously some upfront cost in introducing an energy policy and the necessary infrastructure to support it, but these costs are more than reimbursed over a period of time. And in fact, the return on investment isn't necessarily like years, that can be well within the first year of operation with these tools. So if you go to the next one there, please, Emma. Thank you. So we can see from the session it's hardly spectacularly enthusiastic, and realistically, it's disappointing. And I'll go through what we have found as some of the reasons for this. If you go to the next slide there, Emma, thank you. We found that most of the problems is really attitude rather than technical. There is a lot of technology there, but it's the attitude that is the barrier to the introduction. If you look at selecting a DCM solution, a data center infrastructure solution, you're really confronted with a lot of technology, a lot of buzzwords, a lot of really people trying to sell you things. And on the last count, there were about 55 vendors selling energy-saving tools and devices, both physical and software in implementation. The big ones like ABB, Schneider, and Emerson, they have packages really built upon Intel's DC Manager, and these are quite costly, and really they I think, engineer these solutions for a lot of universities. Talking to people, they know what we want to do, but when we get the technical literature on these products, they find that really the investment looks very onerous, and the learning curve, and they really get confused. So really, a lot of times when people go to do something in the data center, like managers, they find that it's quite a complex number of issues they have to confront, number of licenses, the number of integrated packages, and then you have to figure out how you're going to connect your power and energy sources into these tools so that you can calculate the PUE or how much power and energy your servers are consuming. And the initial costs come in at around 700 to 1,000 per rack. So the main barrier is cost, or rather a lack of budget, because people, when I say people, I mean data center managers and the accounts managers above them. In the university, we have the IT directors and managers, and all our budget ultimately comes from the bursar of the college. And really trying to make a business case for these tools can be quite difficult, particularly in the absence of having previous exposure to them. And this comes down to a deficit of the value recognition of what these tools can deliver. Although people would say there is anecdotal evidence and reports, they still feel that in view of the onerous number of tools and licenses, etc., that are available, and which seems to be necessary to introduce a system, that this is really something that they try and postpone rather than tackle immediately. Let's go to the next slide there, again. So where do you start, and why would you start looking at this issue here? If you go to the next slide there. This is what we found typically in our university, is that you have this situation that the monthly data center electricity bill goes to the accounts. The accounts invariably say why a cost increase yet again. They call the IT manager and ask what's happening. And in response to that, the IT manager sends an email to the heads of school to reduce costs. And the heads of school takes that as an interpretation to send an email to staff to say such things as switch off the lights and machines at the weekend. And there's no real say concerted, organized effort to implement this directive of saving energy. It's more or less left to the discretion of the individuals. and there's a lack of policy, which I think is a problem here. And then added to that, there are new projects, and projects in funding in Ireland, they have no OPEX aspect to the funding, only CAPEX. So people tend to buy new equipment rather than have an opportunity to pay for what they use and become aware of just how how large their consumption is in these projects. And what that means is that the project leaders and heads of school who don't directly have to pay the bills, they don't really take the initiative to drive down costs and energy consumption comes up. So there's one issue here really of management imposing a really stringent, coherent energy policy in the university and having ways in which it can be enforced and monitored. And these are things I think previous speakers have already highlighted and which have contributed to the success in the various projects. So the next slide there, please. Hello. Okay, thanks. So if you look at the next one there, Emma, sorry. So at the end of the day, I want to say this mass confusion. Now, fortunately, we've introduced a system which is an out-of-the-box approach to it, and this has meant that you're not confronted with a mass of licenses, database issues, that we have a solution that comes out of the box, and within really half a day, you've been monitoring the servers and the applications on the, in your data center, and from that, then we identify various energy savings actions. So that project has only started, and some of the results are interesting because we really do highlight how inefficient things are. The consensus on best practices in energy management is that there has to be a policy and a strategy to support it. Measure consumption, understand power demand, and incentivize action. And this is one big problem: is incentivization, encouraging people to take action. And to some degree, unless the the user somehow has to pay for it in some way through some budget, we are seeing that there isn't the initiative and the drive to do something about it. If there were budgets allocated to departments, we feel that would be a way in which improvements could be improved. And then other things which can happen then, such as virtualization and having an effective change management. These are also a vital aspect that has been introduced and which are only being discussed at this point in time. Other things such as advanced power management, they're more secondary once you have the basics in place. Can you go to the next slide there, Emma? Thank you. Mistakes, and we've actually, these are 6 top mistakes that have been really mentioned in several surveys, and unfortunately we have ticked a few of these in our survey, in our project that we've have with universities. There's not sufficient knowledge of the practical operations, so you have to be aware of what's happening on the ground before you start doing anything about sort of a high-level operation analysis. Also, there isn't adequate training at the moment. In fact, we're starting with a group in Europe, and we'll have the first stage of this. We will actually have a master's program starting to train in-house online people in the data center community, and this is an initiative between University of Leeds, University in the Open University in the Netherlands, and various other bodies throughout Europe to train people in data centers into this good management, good practices. And that course will be coming on stream next year, and we're going to use data centers in Kajani and in Finland and Kinetic in Spain as part of this project, so that there can be some practical hands-on experience for the students of this program to see some of the tools in practice and learn how they can apply this knowledge practically to their own institutes. So knowledge and training is vitally important, and having a policy, and this is one area in which we unfortunately, at least now we recognize, but we still have a lot of work to do. Next slide there, please, Emma. So what we have found in the limited exposure where tools have been bought in some of the universities that we are engaged in the project, the the approach has been, unfortunately, not too positive, and this, unfortunately, has reinforced the idea that energy management is, difficult and also expensive. And analysing what has happened, I can explain why that is the case. Go to the next slide there, please. The sensible introduction to energy tools is to look at return on investment. And
we are actually running out of time.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, okay, I'll just finish in the next 30 seconds there. Sorry, Rob. What we find is that people tend to focus on phase 2 and invest in more complex systems rather than phase 1. So instead of taking things in a simple manner and progressing, they actually go and invest a lot, which needs more training, more knowledge, and they don't get the return on their investment. And this is something that I think we have to address, and we are addressing, and hopefully this will lead to more positive, positive outcomes in our circumstances. Sorry, Rob, I'll leave it there and take it from there. Sorry about that. Hand it back.
We did start a little late, and I think there's some really interesting policy thoughts there from you, Damien, to go nicely with the sort of more project-based other presentations, because I think, and I imagine both Steve and our friends from Aberdeen would say that actually getting the environment to make these changes right is perhaps the most important thing. You said something also about the whole question of energy costs. Now, interestingly, you may be interested to know we've got a webinar on the 12th of February next year, which is going to be looking at Jisc's work in energy costs, the work led by Peter James, which I think got some interesting thoughts about incentives and ways of setting up organizational structures to help drive down energy costs through, those sorts of incentives. I'm just aware that we are actually out of time, but I don't know if there's any very quick questions anyone's got for each other or our speakers from the floor, or for our speakers.
Hi, Rob, it's Emma.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yes, unfortunately, we are out of time, so most people have had to log out. But as I've just mentioned in the chat box, if anyone does have any questions, please email them to myself. It's easton@eauc.org.uk, and I will happily pass them on to our presenters today.
Thank you very much. I just still remains for me to say thank you, and also point at some further links. I hope that's been useful for those of you who are able to stay the course, and thank you very much to our speakers. And do feel free to claim a glass of something of your choice if you ever see me at the bar. Okay. It's been great, and look forward to further collaboration and conversations with you as we take this work forward.
Yes, thank you, Rob, and thank you to our other speakers on behalf of the EAUC, and of course thank you to our delegates for attending today. This webinar will be recorded, so it will be available on the Sustainability Exchange later, and I'll send you all an email.